Is there anything in here that's palatable to you? Said Congressman Yarmouth there a moment ago saying he can't imagine any Democrat voting for this thing. Are there parts here that are appealing to you?
Well, based on what we've seen, it's going to be very hard to get support for this piece of legislation. I support child tax credit. I support provisions that help folks in the middle class and those who are working their way toward the middle class. Those are all things that we can look at. But the reality is, this is a huge deficit finance tax cut for the folks who are already at the very top. And we've seen this movie before. We saw it in the early 2000s. What went up were the incomes of the folks in the top 1%. And what also went up was our deficit and debt, which of course ends up being paid by future generations. And Republicans who then discover they care about the deficit after they've provided a tax cut and say, hey, let's cut Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security or education. So on net, this is apparently, all indications are this is going to be a bad deal for folks in the middle and working Americans.
Senator, what's your sense of the timeline here? You say this is going to be a bad deal for Americans. We've heard from a number of people today who say we're at the early stages of this game. The debate is just about to begin. I talked with Senator Pat Toomey earlier today. He talked about the intellectual debates about tax reform and where things are headed yet to happen. Do you have a sense of the timeline here, or at least the timeline that your Republican colleagues would like to see in place?
I don't really, other than the fact we've been told that the Senate Budget Committee may be brought together as early as next week to put together a budget plan that will call for $1.5 trillion increase in the national debt in order to finance these tax cuts that will go disproportionately to the folks at the very top. We should not be increasing our deficit and debt. That's a bad hangover for the economy. We need to be looking for ways to reduce our deficits going forward. So when you're talking about piling on more debt in order to, for example, get rid of the estate tax, which right now is only paid for by couples at $12 million estate and up levels, there's just no justification for piling more debt on the American people in order to give the top 0.2% of the population the tax break. So look, we'll take a look at the details, but what we're hearing so far is bad news for the American public.